Business owners spend years learning how to build a company. Almost none are taught how to leave one. And yet, over the next decade, millions of founders will face one of the biggest financial and emotional decisions of their lives: how to transition the businesses they built. Too often, these conversations begin too late, focus only on price, and overlook everything else that matters, including employees' legacy, identity, and their lives after the sale. Today's guest challenges that model. Molly McCartan is the managing partner at the Whisper Group and is our first sell-side broker to join Ethical Exits. In this conversation, we explore what it looks like to represent founders with both financial rigor and genuine empathy. We talk about why selling a business can feel more like a life transition than a transaction, why the right advisory team matters, and how founders can prepare years before they ever go to market, and why a healthy exit is about far more than maximizing the purchase price. Whether you're years away from selling, actively exploring an exit, or simply curious about how business transitions can be done differently, I think you'll find a lot of value to take away from this conversation. I'm Hannah Sandmeyer, and this is Ethical Exits. Hello, and welcome everyone to another episode of Ethical Exits. I'm your host, Hannah Sandmeyer, and this is the podcast for everything M&A for mission-driven companies, for profit-for-purpose companies, for B Corps, the folks that care about doing more with their business than just generating a profit. And today's guest is Molly McCartan. She is the managing partner at the Whisper Group, where she helps founders build, position, and successfully transition their business. With more than 13 years of experience across M&A, strategic growth, partnership, and business development, Molly brings a perspective that is both transactional, but also deeply human. She believes selling a business is never just a financial event, it's an emotional one too. And Molly also leads the Whisper Group's mission to close the exit gap for female founders, and is also the founder and CEO. I think this is new for you, Molly, but hopefully you can talk about this a little bit, of the Mom Pack, a career platform for working mothers. She is a mother of two and an advocate for expanding ownership and opportunity. And Molly is our very first broker on Ethical Exits, like legit works in this space as a broker, not as an external partner or other kind of service provider on Ethical Exits. So we're so honored to have you. Molly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, we caught up. I'm so excited to have you. I mean, we've I don't even know. I think Becky Darlin connected us like last
Becky
year.
Connected us. Yes, and we instantly hit it off because when is there two people who actually ethically care about M&A?
Well, and women. I mean, women is
that too.
like
that too.
So I think we're double unicorns in that.
I agree.
In that sense.
I agree that we are unicorns in the tribe, and that's why when I met you, I instantly knew that we had to have a partnership, affiliation, all the things to get this important message across to all who care about how to do things the right way, spread the message of what can be done differently, and how we could ultimately execute this vision long term.
Amazing. Molly, we always like to start the show the same way, and everyone has a unique story, and I know that you do too. So, doing the work that you're doing in a highly transactional, high pressure, high commission driven environment, and trying to do it not only for underrepresented groups or misrepresented groups, perhaps even in some instances, and doing that with an ethos and doing that in a way that you can feel confident and good about, that matches your morality set. How did you get into M&A, and what are some of the core memories or early experiences that you've had in your life that have shaped your values and how you show up in your work today?
Yeah, so I kind of fell into M&A. It was never something that was on my vision board of what I wanted to do. And honestly, like most people, I didn't even know what M&A really was until I was in it. My background had been business development, strategy, working with clients. And I always loved the human component of being able to connect with people, have a purpose-driven outcome, and problem solve. So throughout the course of my career, it kind of led me to the evolution of gearing towards M&A without even knowing that that was the pathway I was inadvertently creating. So I was approached by the opportunity to become an M&A. I think manager was my first role. And again, being two-fault, I think that's something as women we do. I said, I don't have any M&A experience, but my skill set was transferable enough for the position. And I was given the opportunity to really learn, build from the ground up, and end up becoming managing director of that firm, leading the team of 25 people on both buy and sell side, and really having a different approach, even from that point of how things can be done differently, how we were told things were done in the past. And now at the Whisper Group, really finding my home in a mission aligned environment. Kind of to answer the latter part of your question, what brought me here, maybe core value wise or memory wise, I was really fortunate to grow up not only with two supportive, incredible working parents, but I was, again, using the term unicorn out of my friend group. My mom was a full time working mom. I didn't know anything different than that mentality of women can do anything, women should be equipped to do anything. And there was no discernment whether or not my mom worked full time and my dad had to do my hair, or I had to have a babysitter or nanny come after school. And I just am so grateful for that opportunity of showing that women can do anything. And my mom was a really strong advocate, being one of the few females in her generation, not only to go to school, to get her master's degree, to learn all the tricks and trade of Wall Street separately as her passion. She loved investment and financing and being really responsible with finances. So I just feel very grateful for having parents who always told me if I just tried my best, that's all that they cared about, and then anything else was secondary. So they never were success driven. They were always ethically and work driving kind of driven.
Molly, so I think to unpack a couple of those things. So you got into M&A, I think how often sometimes do, but I still think it's kind of a unique story. And I think that you and I kind of mirror that. I didn't study finance. Sounds like you didn't study finance either.
No.
You were in sales. The same mechanics are very applicable in M&A. It is
Yeah.
a sale, right? I mean,
Yes.
literally, it's just
Yep.
a bigger one, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the biggest of
Exactly.
all of them, right?
Yes.
And the mechanics of how you do that are similar. So you were able to bring your skill set to that. You overcame your, or maybe you're still even struggling with it. I think all of us still do, especially as women, with imposter syndrome, that you're not supposed to be here. This isn't what you're supposed to be doing. But
Yes.
through the lessons that you learn from your parents, the ethos that you learn from your parents, that you can do anything. You just got to keep showing up, doing the work, and working maybe harder than anybody else in the room, right? So nothing's
Correct.
given to you, right?
No.
That's really interesting. So what did you study in university? What is your educational background?
International politics and economics. So,
Holy shit.
yes.
Okay.
So
There it
very,
is.
yeah, there's the component of my degree. And that's when I did my master's in international political security and economics as well. The reason being is there were such fundamental lessons, again, having to take all the business courses, the economics, but then also having the human component of learning about other cultures, societies, really taking it past the point of just business transaction. I did ultimately further my studies after, actually, when I was in corporate for a while, did M&A, and I did get a certificate in finance from Columbia. But that was after the point of not being well versed in it, and again having that hard work determination to be like, I can be better at this.
Oh,
And
wow.
learn
Okay,
more.
fantastic. And plus that was like connection to your mother because she was also had this interest. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right on. Well, I also love that connection to social fabric, right? Because I do
Yeah.
think we've actually had quite a few people on the podcast that are doing this work that have political science backgrounds. And I don't think that is like, when you think about it, you break down what political science is and international studies, and certainly what you discuss is like, it does have a high, close relationship to
Yes.
this work, right? Because
Absolutely.
I think about M&A transactions, especially in the lower middle market, and certainly in the upper end of the market. These are like civic issues, right?
Yes.
This is the fabric of our economy. no one yet works for just a robot, right? We all work for
Yes.
companies. I mean, I guess
Yes,
that's
not
starting
yet.
to happen a little bit, but I mean,
Yeah.
that's how our cities survive. That's how our neighborhoods survive. That's where we get all the tax revenue, right? So these
Hmm.
transactions matter. So I think that your background in studying, learning, being sensitive to social fabric, cultures,
Hmm.
how governments work, right, how
Yeah.
policy intersects with these issues is really formative. So I actually think that the folks who have a political science background that are doing M&A are
Hmm.
doing the most innovative work because they have a wider scope. They're not just looking at it from a finance perspective, from a P&L, from a dollars and cents perspective as a
Right.
pure financial transaction. They can see a bigger picture,
Hmm.
which I think is super cool. So glad to know that that's kind of where you're coming at it too, Molly. That makes a lot of sense. Um, so you and I, as we've had some conversations, we've
Hmm.
kind of had like some frank conversations about the
Yeah.
nature of the space.
Hmm.
And one of them that we talked about that I thought was really cool that we could pull forward for the audience is that you've said that work in M&A is clearly not just transactional.
Hmm.
And you're working sell side, right?
Yes. Hmm.
Where, and I know that you work with a lot of founders who built businesses not to flip them. They've built them, they've held them for a long time. They've built good operations with employees that have become, not to be cliche, but truly like closer to them than their family in some
Right.
instances. You spend more time with them, have conversations with them that you don't have at home, that are really meaningful. You work through stressful situations with them. So you've said working as a sell side broker, if you're not acting as a part time therapist for your clients, you're doing it wrong. Can you talk a
Correct.
little bit more about that and what you mean by that?
Yes. So I don't believe that in any successful long-term partnership, if you will, you need to have some kind of a relationship. It can't be just purely transactional, which
Mm-hmm.
I think most of the times these type of working relationships are, especially in M&A. So where I believe and the part-time therapist kind of connotation comes in is you need to be not only an advocate for your client, but you need to be a trusted partner. There
Mm-hmm.
needs to be real transparency, real authenticity, and real empathy. You need to understand that they are going through something, most likely, not always for the first time.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
life changing, both fiscally, identity wise, and it's a
Totally.
lot of shit going on. You're running a business, you're trying to sell it. It's
Mm,
really stressful. And a lot of the times, you have employees to also care about. For those founders who are really, to your point, looking at the long term vision of who's working for them, they have mouths to feed. They have a lot of responsibility.
mm-hmm.
So if you don't check in on the people that you're working with beyond the fiscal part of the whole process, I don't believe you're doing your job. You need to understand and be there and talk through what is normal, what is not normal, what shit
Mm,
usually hits the fan at certain points of the process, what is
mm,
typical. Is someone taking advantage of you? If you have a red flag or gut feeling, let's explore that. Let's not ignore it or
mm,
try to mitigate that feeling.
mm. And I think one thing that I don't think people really realize, that sell side, especially sell side, you're working
Mm-hmm.
with the founder and owner like maybe even years before they transact.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, like at the Whisper Group, what we do is like exit readiness and preparation in conjunction with actually representing people through sale and across the finish line. So,
Hmm.
the better and the earlier we can kind of have that relationship begin, evolve, we can set people up for their maximum exit value and
Mm.
really be part of the process and take out that stressful kind of timeline component of needing a fireside sale.
Okay, let's unpack two things there. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think you've also talked about this that you said like some people should not be selling their business, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That they're for lots of reasons. So we could talk about that. There's probably a lot of components of that. And then you said the
Mm-hmm.
second thing about profit maximization, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What does that mean? Or not just profit maximization, but getting the best
Mm-hmm.
deal for
Mm-hmm.
your client. How do you think about that and how do you balance profit or the multiple against other priorities or concerns? Because certainly, and I'll just say this, not to lead you, but not to lead the witness, but to say sometimes the higher multiple can get you into a conversation or a deal with a buyer that, of course, might have short-term pressure on returning dollars to that investment. And they may
Mm-hmm.
make choices or be forced to make choices about the ongoing management of the company that's difficult for that founder to swallow, or even
Mm-hmm.
if they even understand what that means. So, can you talk through
Right.
both of those things?
Yes. So there is a lot we need to kind of unpack here. So the first thing I would say is whether you are exit ready or not, right? I think that's a difficult, it's not a black and white kind of term. Why there's gray, and why I say there's gray is, yes, from a business standpoint, what we do again is part of our work at the Whisper Group is we actually do that audit. We do a whole Whisper report,
Mm,
take you through end to end to see what you're worth today. Where do you want to exit for? What is that gap and how can we get you there? Now, the reason this exercise is so crucial for the process is a lot of times people who are looking to sell and maybe seek certain brokerage firms or go to websites are told they're going to get a certain valuation that is
hmm
inflated in order
hmm
for them to get the opportunity to partner with someone. What we do is we're going to give you the realistic number, the
hmm
realistic multiple range, and the rationale and methodology behind that. Now, why that is so important is, at the end of the day, it's up to the founder whether or not they do want to sell and now is the time, right? That is a personal decision. But what we can do is be transparent around, can we get you the value that you are seeking today? Is that actually the value of your business? And help
mm
you identify those right partners, the long-term kind of integration proposition of what this could look like, and be that guiding light for our clients throughout the process. So, in order to kind of pave that pathway, we like to talk through all these important things, because sometimes if
hmm
people just make adjustments, now some are small, some are larger, that could radically change the multiple of the business.
mm
Reason being is the different buyers will quantify their valuation, whether it's adjusted EBITDA,
Yep.
the seller discretionary earnings, or revenue
Yes.
multiple. So these factors of what we can do to change these slight nuances within a business could drastically change the valuation. So the earlier
hmm
we have the opportunity to have those conversations and explore a potential sale, we know we can change the valuation and what the potential of the business is by kind of getting in there early and working with our clients, rather than telling them, like, this is what you need to do, or this is how it's going to be done, without actually showing the pathway and then actually helping with the execution of it.
mm hmm
I think those are two of the major ways of why people think they might be exit ready, or ready to sell at that point in time, and maybe not getting the valuation that they want. Or if, you know, someone tells you a number that you want to hear that's not the actual reality of your business, great. There's a thing called due diligence, and that's going to get uncovered. And there might be a
mm
retrade or renegotiation, which no founder wants to deal with at that point of the process, when it's already emotionally and mentally
Right.
draining at that point.
hmm
So I think these are some of the major factors of why it's so early, important to get in there early, rather. And then how being that kind of transparent guideline beyond the numbers, thinking of it from the ethic standpoint, and then in addition, bringing in that right team early who's going to help you get this across the finish line. So as
hmm
important as a broker, or in our case, we advisors, we love to make sure that you have the right, who's your tax strategist? Are you set up structurally in the most advantageous way to get you the maximum dollar post exit? Are we talking with, what is your future wealth plan? And I'm not talking about, once you sell the business, you have all this money. Great. No, we
Sure.
need to be thinking before to set you up. What's your retirement goal? Are you going to have to
mm
work again? If you're going to have to work again, what does that look like? Do you have a really great advisor that's going to help map this out for you? What you need to do, what you can invest if that's what you choose to do, what you put in savings. If you have kids, you need a 529C. Looking through these different
Oh,
options.
wow.
And then the attorney. The attorney is so instrumental in this process, and to have someone you trust, respect, and will again be in that team with you is integral for your long-term protection, the protection of the transaction, and what will ultimately make or break a deal. So what we like to do, and what I like to do especially, is make sure that I am working in tandem with everyone. We need to have
hmm
one cohesive team internally, whether it's the actual team of the business or a team that you're bringing together to get this across the finish line.
hmm Yeah, and do you guys ever speaking to that, like the deal team, right? I
Hmm.
think that's really important. And you raised, a couple of those additional parties that maybe don't people don't think about. They think that the broker is a one-stop stop. The broker will get them everything that they need, but
Hmm.
really it is the team, and it's a team of experts, subject matter experts that can help put together all sides of that deal structure and all sides of that deal composition, and also the planning for retirement, which I think is really valuable. I don't
Yeah.
actually think I've heard a lot of brokers talk about that. Like, what does this
Hmm.
look like in 10 years after your exit? Do you have to go back to work? I mean, wow, Molly.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so that is super valuable. If a seller comes to you and they don't have those pieces in place, they don't have a
Hmm.
wealth advisor, they don't have a good attorney that they trust and understands their business.
Hmm.
There's been maybe a family member been doing the books, and they've been doing
Hmm.
okay job, but maybe not the best, or not, certainly the books aren't in shape where under due diligence they would survive.
Hmm.
Do you advise on those connections? Do you guys have a network built in of folks that you work with, or what do you do in that instance?
Yes, we have a very trusted and very insular community, meaning we will never recommend someone unless we've either worked with them, hired them
Okay.
ourselves, or know that they're going to do right by our clients. Our
Okay.
clients' protection is everything to us. So, why we built this very trusted pool of resources is A, to make sure that our clients have accessibility from all aspects. So, if I always say, if you're too many things, you're not good at one thing.
Mm,
Especially, you need to have the versatility and expertise in each of these lines. So, meaning, yes, we could advise you, of course, on high level in each of these things, but you need a certified financial planner. You need a certified tax strategist. You need an M&A lawyer with a JD to help make
mm,
sure that you are getting what you need to get across the
yeah.
finish line. And why we echo these sentiments, and it's one of the first things I say when we take someone on. I said, I want you to start thinking about this now. I want you to start
Mm,
interviewing people now so that you don't feel
mm,
pressured. And I give options. I always give options. We do not have exclusive partnerships with one sole
cool.
entity by any means, because
Yeah.
again, very much like your advisor or broker should be part therapist, part of, strategic advisor. They should also have your best concerns for, knowing that you might not work with every person that might be brought to you. So I always love to give people at least 2 to 3 options of each of those
Hmm.
areas to make sure that there is alignment, to make sure that they are comfortable, to make sure that their personality matches. There's a lot more,
Mm.
again, than just getting across the finish line.
Oh, how funny. Yeah, just the comfortability of like the inner working styles.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
important to me. If I like
Yeah.
these two people may not mesh at all, I'm like, I don't know if,
Yeah. Right.
I would move forward with the introduction, or if I did, I would say, here are 3 options. I think this would be a great match for you, and this is why. However, if you're looking for XYZ, this person might be a better match for you, and this is why. So we're very intentional
E-
with everything that we do.
Excellent. The problem isn't intent, it's infrastructure. They all want better outcomes, they just can't find each other in time. In traditional deal flow, processes are competitive and price becomes the only signal that matters. So we built something different, a place where buyers, sellers, and partners can share what really matters, where what matters is visible: stewardship, certification, values, identity, intent, and goals, and find each other earlier before outcomes are decided, where you can search for alignment, not just listings, and where the model itself is different. No commissions, no incentives to push deals that don't fit, but a real opportunity to give back, so that when great outcomes happen, they can fund what comes next. Because when the right people find each other earlier and more consistently, everything changes. Better outcomes by design. Steward Market. Okay, so what I'm hearing a lot is, again, like focus on financial preparation, which is
Hmm.
important, right?
Yes.
But that also can lead to some pretty nasty outcomes depending on what that founder or owner is seeking in
Hmm.
that exit, right?
Yes.
So there's all sorts of anecdotal data on this. There are studies and statistics on M&A failure rates right? I don't even know how failure is really like what the scope of that or how that's defined, but it's pretty
Right.
high. Like
Yeah.
M&A traditionally is like doesn't have successful outcomes, right? I think
Right.
half of M&A transactions today are considered failures by whatever metric that means. And a lot of founders or owners who are displeased with what happens to
Hmm.
their company, or they're heartbroken post transaction, typically 2 to 3 years after they've sold their business, and they see what's happened to it. We've seen that more often than not, especially when financial buyers are involved, and maybe the
Yeah.
seller doesn't understand their IRR, their internal rate of return,
Hmm.
or how fast they're looking to pay back this investment. And so we see that happening where the profit maximization, which is
Hmm.
like you understand how to do that, like you just clearly explained in multiple
Yeah.
ways how you can drive for the best financial outcome for your clients.
Hmm.
But that is not the whole picture.
No.
Increasingly, it's not the whole picture. In Whisper Group, I understand you work predominantly with women. I think that sometimes you will represent men,
Yeah.
but you work with women.
Yes.
We're different, right?
Hmm.
We the outcomes that we're seeking sometimes can be different, or we think about these things, or emotionally we're attached to these outcomes maybe a little bit differently
Yeah.
than our male counterparts. So how are you preparing clients for that? How are you working through deal structure? How are you perhaps even advising folks who are pushing so hard on the profit maximization? No, Molly, I want to sell my business because I want to tell my friends I got 5, 6x, 10x, a multiple of my
Right.
EBITDA. Is like this brag ethos thing, right? This ego
Yeah.
driven thing, but where that might put them in a pool with maybe some unsavory actors
Yeah.
that will do things to their company, that in effect will destroy it in order to get that return.
Yes. So I think it's a great question because I think it's there's there's so many things I could touch upon this, but actually I think starting with what Carrie Kirpin, our CEO, says and co-founder says constantly is it needs to be a happy and healthy exit. And I think that's
Mm,
the important thing to stem from first and foremost. Not every exit's going to look the same,
yeah,
especially when you're working with female founders. We find that they are more concerned about their staff, about the integration, about the company long term, even post their exit from the company if they decide not to stay on. There are so many factors that need to be considered before you sign on the dotted line. So, one of our biggest advice and counsels when we work with people is have those tough conversations early. Ask the hard
mm,
questions. Make sure you are protected from the time of LOI all the way through the purchase agreement. Make sure you are clear on your role right now, meaning at the time of the transaction. What
yeah,
does this integration pathway look like, not only for your company, but for you as the founder?
mm,
So sometimes
mm,
people want to stay on in a consultancy capacity. Sometimes they want to stay full time. Sometimes they don't want the overhead of being the CEO anymore. They want to move into a different role within the organization that is
sure.
less onerous on their, day to day or overhead.
So the statistics on M&A failure rates is like
Yes.
bad. Like I think in any other profession, any other space would be like, holy shit, we need to
Yes.
redesign the whole thing.
Right.
It's not working. I mean, when half of M&A
Mm-hmm.
transactions are considered failures, that's like, I mean, way too high. I would think even a 30%
Yes.
failure rate is too high, right? But we're at the point of like 1 out of 2 being considered failures. And I'm not sure how who defines what a failure is, what that means, what
Yeah.
the scope is on that is. But is that so? A couple questions there, Molly. Is that what you're seeing? And if it is what you're seeing, why do you think that is the case? What is missing, or what's not being addressed, or how is traditional M&A being structured in a way that leads to these
Yeah,
poor
I
outcomes?
actually think in general it's true in the sense that it's harder to get deals across the finish line than it is to not, right? And I think there's multiple reasons
Mm,
as to why. I think a huge one is people that are first approached by our buyer are not doing the financial due diligence. It's great if you all have kumbaya and get along, but if you're not asking for evidence of whether it's, bank statements of funds, you're asking for some kind of proof and
mm,
validity that they have the financing to execute on the transaction is paramount. As
Mm.
much as we talk about the importance of the
Okay.
integration and buyers and sellers kind of coinciding and for long term, you need to have the money at the end of the day. That's the first thing. And I can't tell you how many times, I would say, at least from the hundreds of deals I've worked on,
Okay.
if something fell through, 85% was because of a financial reason, one way or another. Whether it's the lack of funding that they thought they would have, whether finances didn't check out,
Mm.
whether at the end of the day they kind of got cold feet and just wanted to pull out as a result. They didn't know if this deal would be worth their investment. um, were a lot of the big things, or
Mm.
they were promised, let's say they were in the midst of SBA and then last minute they get turned down. And then another
Yep.
side from just the funding perspective is also through the due diligence process. If deals are of a certain size, although I encourage pretty much any transaction if they can to do a quality of earnings report. So it's an auditing of the financials. Now, 9 out of 10 times, it's from
Sure.
the buyer's perspective. They're paying for it. They're asking for it to be conducted on the sell side to validate the finances.
Sure.
But then, as sell side representation, I think it's equally as important for sell side to get their own independent Q of E
Mm.
for multiple reasons, because then it's a great
Mm.
leverage and negotiation tactic against the buyer. It also protects them long term. And then, if you are being forthcoming and upfront with your financials, everything should check out. So that mitigates a lot of the back and forth at that point of
Mm.
the process. Yes.
And risk
Yes.
for both parties. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So that's one part, I guess, of this like calculus of M&A being
Yes.
having poor results, is deals that can't even get across the finish line, which I'm sure is like
Yes.
a huge number, right? And I think there's a lot of outside factors, influencers on Instagram who are convincing a lot of folks that like buying a
Yes.
business is like easy, right? And it's just you can just get an SBA loan and then you can find someone else to back the other 10%, and you don't even have to put in your own money, or that you can find two backers to put in 20%, whatever. You know what I mean? And then you can just walk into this cash flowing business. That I think is a huge problem. And also has led to
Yeah.
maybe some poor outcomes for both parties, and certainly for
Yeah.
brokers. You put in a lot of time and effort, and oftentimes you're paid based only when a transaction goes through. Right? You're not collecting a retainer for representing your client.
Well,
It's
that's where we're
transaction
different.
related.
We actually do have a retainer model
Okay.
with a very small success fee. So, brokers will typically charge these egregious
I see.
amounts and really try to dictate the outcome of the transaction based upon their fee structure. Why and how we're different is we
I
cap everything.
see.
We do a
Okay.
very affordable monthly retainer with a very low success fee, because as we're trying to close the exit gap, we're trying to
Okay.
keep the money in the hands of the founder. We are not trying to take it all away.
Okay. Fantastic. I think that's huge, and I think that really also sets up the way that you approach it, because if you're being paid, then
Yes,
you'll slow down and you won't push the people that you're representing into
correct.
situations that might not be in their best interest. Okay. So that's huge. Thank you for explaining that. And you also talked about the whisper report, where you do this pretty
Mhm.
hefty process, but it's templated and it's something that you can
Yes,
deliver quickly. Can you say just a little bit more
of
about
course.
that and like what
So
that
the Whisper
is for
report is
folks?
meant to be, again, that audited blueprint of where a company is today in terms of their financials, where and what their exit value is. What is your dream exit? Again, financially, but then beyond the
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
finances. So we walk through, we request
Yeah.
several items of documentation, but nothing egregious, nothing close to what a due diligence process would be, but a couple of documents so we could
Mm.
put together this
Sure.
report. Then what we do is we pair clients with an exited founder. So we make sure that whomever's doing the report has been a founder who's
Mm.
successfully exited, who has been in their shoes. Yes, and
Oh,
and
wow.
we tie it by
What?
industry and personality. Yep.
Okay. Oh, wow. So that I think kind of captures then the second part of that original question is like, okay, so there's instances where deals don't even go through, and then there's the other
Hmm.
instances where deals have gone through and the founder
Correct.
hates the outcome.
Yes.
They regret the outcome.
Yes.
They're heart sick about it, right? John Abrams talks about this as fat
Hmm.
wallet, broken heart syndrome, right? Where they got
Yeah.
maybe the financial value. So they secured the exit, the financial value. They got the multiple that was fair. But oh my God, do they hate to see what happens to their company? And for some people, this is like real, where
Mhm.
especially in smaller towns, right? Where they can't even go to the freaking
Right.
grocery store, Molly, because they're worried that they're going to run into
Mhm.
former suppliers who maybe
Yeah.
lost that big contract, and that led to layoffs at their company, to their former employees, right? Like you said, those employees who other
Right.
also have mouths to feed, right? And that transcending, multiplying effect of that downstream impact. So how are you I mean, is that also something that you're thinking about? Is that where you're also connecting founders who have had an exit? So when they're advised and they talk to these founders pre-sale, they're saying like, okay, cool, you got all these factors, but have you thought about all these other things that will persist post exit, that you'll be thinking about, and you don't want to have regret on
Yes,
those
so
in those
absolutely.
areas?
So there's a couple ways. So in addition to how we model our business as a whole, so again, having the exited founders be the advisors, we also have the largest community of exited female founders, and that's where we source our advisors from. So
Mm.
the whole purpose of
Oh,
this is
dang.
beyond, again, the transaction, and to think
Okay.
of the long-term incentives. So what does the integration look like? What does your identity as the founder, because
Mm-hmm.
that is one of the most prominent reasons why people are unhappy with their exit at the end of the road. Again, to your point, which is a great one, it's not always because it was, bad fiscally. They might have gotten a really hefty check, but they're miserable. Why are they miserable?
Right.
It's either because they
Right.
don't know their identity
Yes.
now. You'll always be the founder, but you're not always going to be the
Mm.
CEO. And if you're tied to an earnout, you're living
Uh-huh.
in someone else, you're living in your home while someone else redecorates it, and you can't do anything about it. So that's how
Yeah, no
Carrie always
shit.
describes it from
Yeah.
her personal standpoint, which I love. I'm like, oh my gosh, imagine living in your house and someone comes in and is like, nope, we're gonna change this, and you're like, ah. So I think one of the learning
Right.
curves, again,
Right.
we've heard from having this community of phenomenal people to advise and help
Mm.
our clients get across the finish line, is making sure that whatever agreement terms that you're settling for your own employment agreement, and or not, meaning if you exit, then you exit, but if you're staying on, make sure you're really explicitly clear as to your role responsibilities. If you do have an earnout, how your
Mm.
involvement gets to dictate that earnout. Are you directly
Mm.
responsible? Is it a trickle
Mm.
down effect? Can you be control of the P&L and who you hire on, who you let go? How does this look like? Because again, I think
Mm.
people just see numbers. They might see timelines and they think that's it. Or they have implicit trust and didn't do enough of the diligence from the beginning
Totally.
of what is the long-term plan.
Totally. Well, that opens up a big can of worms. That I think, and you talked about how attorneys
Yes.
are so important in the process, like having a good attorney, because yeah, the financials, sure, sure,
Yeah.
sure, but structure is like
100%.
everything, right? Like we like to say, like price is a headline,
Yes.
structure is the live
Yes.
reality, right? And and often I think, and you've seen this, I'm sure, dozens of, not hundreds of times, where nice things are said.
Mm-hmm.
Nice things are said. Oh, sure. We'll maintain your B
Yes.
Corp certification. Oh, sure. We won't change your ethical supply chain. Oh, sure. We'll maintain your philanthropic commitments to your the charities that you've been supporting over the years, and be going to all the banquets, and you have all these
Right.
friends, and it's a big part of your ego too, right? Wrapped up in like how you've been giving back or showing up for your community. We'll maintain all that. No problem, man. We get it. That's one of the
Right.
reasons we're buying you. It is all the nice things, right? And then none of that is
Mm-mm.
legally in the
Nope.
document.
No.
It's not enforceable, right? I mean, we've seen that time and time again in the social enterprise space with B Corps, where people are said, sure, 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 hey, we will maintain your B Corp certification. We'll even contribute to B Lab. We'll donate to them as part of the deal. But then a couple years down the road, maybe they flipped the company because they were really actually a holding
Yep.
company that was packaging up
Yep.
lots of companies like yours, right? And they flip it and they sell it to private equity. Private equity dumps it, all of it. Your company's not even around. I mean, I know you have
Yep.
founders in your network where they have tried to
Mm-hmm.
buy their company back from private equity because they
Yeah.
hate the outcome so much, and that's not how some of these private equity firms
Right.
work, right?
Right.
They don't care. It's done. It's over. They had their arbitrage moment. That. It's a
Mm-hmm.
financial mechanism. Um, so, I mean, how do you talk through or help folks with that, or like what are maybe some really
Mm-hmm.
interesting covenants that you've seen written into contracts, maybe some creative deal structures that help people do that? I mean, outside of what I'm aware of, like
Yeah.
with the trust model, right? The EOTs, perpetual purpose trust, like what Patagonia has done. Your mission, sorry, that is
Right.
vibes in a
Yeah.
transaction. I mean, largely it's not going to
Yep.
be legally protected. But what are maybe some creative things that you've seen or people have done or has been written into
Yeah,
contracts
so
that can kind of
you
preserve
hit the
that?
nail on the head with like there is going to be a risk mitigation on both sides no matter what. You could have the best lawyer in the world, at the
Mm.
end of the day there still has to be some trust
Hmm.
involved. And I I compare the whole M&A process to
Totally.
marriage. You get matchmaked with someone, you date for a while, you decide maybe you want to move in before sealing the deal, maybe not. And then you go through with it. And then it's like learning how to cohabitate. And it's the
Oh, sure.
exact
Yeah.
same thing if you think about it. You
Mm,
have to have a little bit of trust. You do
mm,
what you can, and then you see how it works. The
mm,
point with protection and covenants
mm,
around like those specific kind of items is, well, there's a couple of different ways, right? You can either make sure that you have an
mm,
ironclad um, subsequent agreement. So again, if it's tied to your employment, what that looks like long term. It could look like if you
mm-hmm,
structure an asset purchase agreement versus a stock purchase agreement, do you get to hold on to the name of your company? Do you get to still have ownership of the company
mm,
itself? Because that's an interesting way you could kind of go around it.
mm.
They could still buy the company, but you could still have the rights to the name and the entity overall.
Oh,
Yeah. So, meaning
interesting.
whether do you legally still
Hmm.
hold the domain or not? Now, of course, if someone's buying your business, they want to acquire everything.
Sure.
But in some cases, they don't want to assume the entirety of the company, and you could do some yeah, you could do some
They want
interesting carve
assets.
outs. So I
Yeah.
would say you have to have someone that you can really be strategic with, and then you bring in legal to make it executional. So it's a two-pronged process. What are your objectives?
Mm.
How can we brainstorm to be really creative to get you there? And then legally, what mechanisms and protections as much as possible can we put in those guardrails to ensure its long-term safety and progression of what the original intent was?
Mhm.
You didn't start your business just to sell something. You started it to solve something. But solving big problems with limited resources, it's slow, it's hard. And in a market moving this fast, values need more than vision. They need velocity. This is the kind of challenge Up and Over Advisors was born to solve. We help mission-driven companies scale smarter through values-amplifying acquisitions. Because when ethical founders grow, capitalism gets an upgrade. We do the heavy lifting to find and qualify companies ready to partner or sell to someone like you. We don't just close deals, we open doors to broader impact. Ready to scale yours? Let's build the future on purpose. Visit upandoveradvisors.com to learn more.
Mm-hmm. Okay, amazing. I think there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack that we can go further, but I'm curious about another pressing concern that we're all facing. I'm sure that you read the McKinsey report that came out in February from the Economic Mobility Institute of Economic Mobility, excuse me, where they
Yeah.
talked about the silver tsunami and that there's 6,000 or 6 million businesses across the United States in the next 10 years that will be needing to transition based on the founder's age.
Mhm.
You work sell side, right? So there are, in my community, they're based on data from Project Equity, 46% of businesses in Portland are owned
Yeah.
by baby boomers, right? People who are 55 age plus. Most of civic government, business organizations, agencies that support small businesses and owners are focused on scaling a business, starting a business, being an entrepreneur, bringing in
Right.
Oracle, right, as a big job provider, right? Ignoring largely, right, that there are a ton of businesses that hold good jobs, that have created good jobs, have been providing a lot of good tax revenue, that are really
Mhm.
important to that community, that are aging out. In the city of Portland, I could share, like there was recently a study that was done. They surveyed 120 of these legacy business owners, so business owners that are been in business for over 20 years, and they asked them what their priorities were, what kind of resources they wanted from the city. Succession planning was not on there, Molly. It didn't make the top 8, right? These are conversations that folks
No.
don't want to have, right? they avoid them for some reason. They think that even though they know like death and taxes are like the guarantee, it's also like a guarantee that like you own a business, you will have to
Right.
transition out of your
Right.
business. Like hopefully, right? It's going to be to a family
Yeah.
member. Sure. That's great. But we've seen, especially third generation, they are not interested in
No.
running their parents' business,
Correct.
right? They
Yeah.
want to do something else, right? So how do you, or what are things that you're doing, maybe, or you're thinking about in your business? Like, because I see this as a civic, as a social contract stuff. Like, how do we help people prepare? How do we help people start to think about this? How do we help people feel comfortable with doing exactly what you suggested, which I think is the most important thing? Having this conversation 2 to 3 years out, 5 years out,
Right.
before they're in
Right.
active
And I
conversations
think
with a
that's
buyer.
exactly it. It's education. People don't know what they don't know. And especially the baby boomer age. I mean, even the topic and relevancy of exits is only becoming more prevalent now for the current generations. So I think
Yeah,
by making people
right.
aware of how important this is and that it's not the sole responsibility of their family to take it over if they don't want to. There's a lot of interested parties. There's a new
Totally.
wave of entrepreneurship. There's a lot of people who might want to get involved.
Sure.
So by educating people of their options that they don't either, which breaks our heart the most, is seeing people think that the only option is to dissolve their business if nobody in the family wants it.
Yes,
If you are
yes,
making money and you're
yes,
profitable, you are a
yes,
sellable business. So let's talk through it and
yes.
make it a way that you're going to be happy and proud of the legacy that you built. Let's have those conversations so you are
Hmm.
walking away with something that makes you feel good, proud, happy, excited for the future, giving maybe someone a new life of entrepreneurship that they've never had this as a possibility, but they now can. And I think that people recognize, especially post COVID, the importance of these small businesses and how integral, to your point, to the community and taxes they are. What
Hmm.
happens when a pandemic happens and the brick and
A
mortars are no
hundred.
longer here?
Yeah. Yes. And Starbucks moves in and
Correct.
all the money moves out of that community, right? Yeah, I mean, Project Equity has data on that. They say that 3 times the amount of money will recirculate in the community if the business
Yes.
is locally held versus an external buyer, right? We'll just siphon out all those profits, right? So I think that's super valuable. Of course, I mean, I agree with you. Education is a big one, but even getting people to even like want to have that
Mhm.
conversation is a struggle. If you look at all the, a lot of the business events outside of M&A specific events, it is about like growth scale, like how to find money, how to even hang on, even when you shouldn't maybe be hanging on. You should be looking at like, how do we stabilize the business? How do we batten down the hatches? How do we reduce the revenue concentration across several,
Yes.
a couple to handful of clients? How do we make our business more transferable? How do I pave a way for me to like
Mhm.
find the exit with dignity and with the financial liquidity that I need, because a lot of founders too, like they put a ton of money, not only their time and energy in the business, and they need to
Right.
cash out, right? They need to have that moment where they like get some of that money out of the business. So those are all really valid things. And I think the other thing that we're seeing, and you kind of touched on this with COVID, like how COVID was like a really important moment for all of us to like kind of recognize how
Yes.
interdependent we are. So we have the silver tsunami coming, right? Or here, 6 million business owners, 6,000 businesses a year, 500,000 businesses a year looking to convert. We have the disruption from AI, right? So there's so many folks that are exiting university or mid-career that cannot find a job to save their lives, right? So you talked about like, or you hinted a little bit about entrepreneurship through
Yep.
acquisition. That's becoming more of a thing. Um, One thing though that I want to tie that back to that I think is interesting because you touched on, I think you didn't say explicitly, but like seller financing
Yeah.
and earnouts, right? Both of those things I think
Yes.
widen your
Yes.
buyer pool, right? They help more people become owners, but they can be
Yes.
risky, right? Or maybe
Mhm.
not even possible for the selling founder. What are your thoughts about that on like balancing? Because I'm sure for you want your sellers to see
Yeah.
every and each option, every type of buyer that might be viable. They can close a transaction, all the different maybe creative structures where risk is
Yes.
shared appropriately, the outcomes are really healthy, to use
Yes.
your language, right? But also one that is balanced maybe correctly for that
Yeah,
seller.
I think that every type of loan or buying mechanism requires some kind of a risk mitigation. Now, if it's SBA, you're
Sure,
doing a lot,
totally.
like basically you are guaranteeing like personal guarantee of your assets to get the loan and everything.
Yeah, right.
That's one way, but on the safe side, you have a very low interest rate. It's very government regulated, so you know it's going to be protected in that sense. And then from the seller standpoint, you're getting majority cash at close from a SBA type of loan. Then if you're looking at, seller financing, that's a great option. But again, what if they can't make their payments? What is the risk mitigation there? They might have a high interest rate on that, which is great. But then again, I
Mm-hmm.
would put some protection mechanism in the deal terms. Again, why the lawyers are so key is if they default on their payments, you get the business back. We've seen that a lot. So then that again, yeah, that can mitigate the
Oh,
risk for the
wow.
seller.
Okay.
If the buyer defaults on their
Hmm.
payments, they get the lien and the asset of the business back. Um, then you have the earnout, which
Mm-hmm.
is honestly part of, I'd say, 75% of transactions now. Earnouts are integral, but it's how they're carved out, what terms are they dictated upon, and what portion of the transaction is the earnout. So there's a lot of really important
Oh,
ways
mm-hmm.
that we could factor that in. But I think for people, especially new entrepreneurs who are looking maybe with, the influx of AI and everything, why not pursue
Yeah,
maybe making an acquisition if you can get some type of a loan or put some money towards it as a
totally.
personal option for you to explore? Because again, there's a lot of not only tax incentives, but there's a lot of lending opportunities for those first time people exploring acquisitions. And there could be a really exciting time, and people are
Mm-hmm.
only now really, especially women actually, thinking like, wow, I could grow through acquisition, whether or not it's their first entrepreneurial
Totally.
adventure or they're trying to grow
Totally.
and scale at a
Yes.
quicker pace.
Yep. 100%. We have on Stewart Market,
Yes.
our net new marketplace that we just
Exciting.
launched last month. We have a new,
Yes. Yeah.
it is very exciting. Thank you, Molly. We have a buyer on there. They're certified B Corp. They're looking to scale and grow through
Mhm.
acquisition. They want to hold long term. They're looking for a deal structure that won't
Yep.
destroy the business, right? So they're looking for something that can balance the risk, so they're not trying to over leverage or put too much debt on the business beyond the debt capacity. They're thinking, of course, thoughtfully through all these things, and then they're also looking at this growth, not only adding more revenue where they can do more good things in community, they can use that margin for their mission, but they're also using this as a lever to eventually convert the
Mhm.
whole entity to employee ownership. That to me is like the ultimate lever of using M&A
100%.
as a force
Yeah.
for good, right?
It, oh,
Where
no,
that
no,
seller
continue.
is
Yeah.
made, yeah, the seller is made whole. They get their financial liquidity moment. They get liquidity, but they don't have to run the risk of their business totally being dumped, right? Or their staff to be laid off in order to repay the investment
Right.
for the buyer that's coming in. And their employees are part of a net new future that can outlive the founder and even maybe create shared wealth creation from what they've
Yes.
all been
And
building
I've
towards.
actually seen that as a shift in general. Founders are being really
Mm,
mindful of who helped build them to get there. And whether or not if it's a complete
dope.
overhaul of
Yeah.
those types of models, it's even giving them equity post acquisition to stay on board or doing employee bonus retention type of initiatives. Now, I know those are not, to your point, of the dream situation of getting
Yeah.
everyone their own liquidity, but it's we're starting to think in the right mentality of, how did you get to where you did? Let's incentivize and support people who helped
Mm-hmm.
along the way, and let's spread the wealth. I actually just spoke with someone at a conference who sold her company for several hundred million and had a couple of siblings on the cap table, but they made sure that they took care of every single employee. And based upon about how much time they were there,
Mm-hmm.
several employees made over $1 million at the time of
Totally.
the transaction. I love that.
So you love that one.
I thought if I
That one
just,
feels good.
and I didn't work with her. This is just from a shared learning
Yeah.
experience. And I just thought that was so incredible to hear that people do really care about people. And these are
Mm.
thousands and thousands of employees. So they have to be kind of mindful with how they
Yeah.
do a structure. But I just thought
Yeah.
that was a wonderful way to show like, yes, we are no longer going to be part of this
Mm.
organization, but you're protected, you're wanted. And the values we instilled in this company are going to
Mm.
continue long term.
Yeah. Amazing. And that you
Yes,
can, that's all possible, right? That you can still get your
absolutely.
financial liquidity event, but you don't have to like
No, you
hoard all
don't.
of it. You know, there could be shared outcomes, right? Super cool. Molly, so you've been sitting in, you came out of like traditional M&A, now you're working for the Whisper Group, you feel really
Yes.
good about where you're positioned. I think the way that you structured Whisper is like
Thank you.
super cool. You and your colleagues, how you've moved away from the traditional way
Mhm.
that things are structured, where I know a lot of brokers, they work for a long period of time just getting the seller ready, getting comfortable, doing all the education, preparing them, um, and then that the only way that they get paid is at the end of that. So of course there's some
Yes.
pressure, right? There's some incentives
Yes.
that are working, right? In a multitude of ways. I think that the way that you guys have structured what you're doing is really interesting, and it relieves some of that pressure and lets you do some of your best work. And I know from what I know of you, Molly, and I don't think that you're unusual. You want
Yes.
to do really good work. You want to have outcomes that you
Yes.
are proud of, right? You don't want to have conversations with clients. Nobody does. 2 years down the road where they're like, Molly, this was not a good thing for me. I'm really upset. Right. This has been a hard transition. I don't like what's happened to my company. That's not a good client call. You want clients that are super pleased, that show up, that are then they join your advisory network. Maybe they can become a broker themselves because they feel empowered to help
Exactly.
others in this capacity. So if you could do two things for me. Tell me where you think today that M&A is broken, or that the space
Mhm.
itself needs to evolve. And if you were to uh, re-envision or continue to add enhancements to the way you do business to deliver more consistent outcomes, like just like the one that you even shared, right? Outcomes that are 1 + 1 = 3 outcomes. What does that look like? So what's wrong today? Where would you isolate that today? And what would you in the
Yes,
future, what
I
would
would
you like
love
to
to have it
change?
less transactionally focused and more about the client. What is the client outcome? How do we make exits happy and healthy? What can we do to work in collaboration
Mm,
so that we are incentivized to work for what their goal is, not what's going to get us the maximum fee structure? So by evolving M&A in a way
hmm.
that takes care of what your client end goal is and not taking an insane amount of the fee at the end, you're working towards a mutually
Yeah.
exclusive partnership relationship and getting at the end of the line what's going to make M&A turn from that 50% rate to maybe a 75 or 80. If you're working for the right reason,
Mm,
doing the right work, taking care of the people that you are working
hmm.
for and doing it the right way, the outcomes will undoubtedly be better and better long term. So I think that's one thing. I think
Mm,
again, bringing in those right experts from the beginning, I think that's going to change the
mm,
evolution of M&A.
hmm.
One person can't do everything. You need to
Mm,
bring in the right team to
hmm.
support you. For those who don't know what they don't know,
Hmm.
ask the questions and people will advise and bring in those right partnerships to make sure that you are taken care of across the line. Now, yes, I know people are like, well, that's going to cost money. It will cost you a third of what it would cost down the line if you don't bring in the right people. Whether it's yeah, whether or not it's
Oh,
from a
wow.
tax standpoint, thinking that from, the the big beautiful bill and
Mm,
like QSBS and changing from a taxation structure from a sole proprietor LLC or, an S corp to C corp can save you up to,
yeah.
$15 million of tax-free incentives. So there's a lot of things that again, if you
Mm,
are having the right team behind you can help guide you into that way. Again, from the wealth
mm,
management standpoint, thinking of your end result and working backwards. What do you need to retire? What are you comfortable? All
mm,
of these things that I'm explaining, you're like, Molly, that's not how M&A is broken. That's why M&A is broken because people are not having these conversations. And there's a negative association with
mm.
M&A, either people who work in the space or the process
Ew.
overall.
Ew. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's really valuable because I do think that you're largely right, and the
Yeah.
environment is dark. I mean, I think I told you when maybe our
Mm-hmm.
first or second conversation, I was talking to a firm that buys companies. They have a roll up strategy, but they hold a permanent hold, and they have a mission-driven ethos. They're a cool firm, nice patient capital structure. They don't do like heavy leverage buyouts. They don't gut a company. They really want to preserve and hold for the community and for the employees, and then they also infuse that business with cash so they can help them grow and evolve. And when I was speaking with them, I'm like, okay, cool. So who are you working
Yeah.
with on a broker or attorney side? Like, who are your partners? And they say, well, no, Hannah, if we call somebody and they're not a right fit for us, we don't send them anywhere. We just hang up the phone. They don't redirect them to advisory. They don't redirect them to attorneys. They don't try to help them continue that conversation, maybe with another buyer that would be a better fit. They just kind of, because they're doing, off market
Right.
sourcing for their own deals, right? They just kind of leave them hanging. And I've really sat with that, Molly, for the last, I don't know, 8 months or so since I had that conversation, because that just didn't
Yeah.
feel right. It's like, that doesn't seem to be the right thing, where you poke, in this instance, you're kind of poking the beehive. You're having this conversation with a founder that maybe has never thought of it
Right.
before, now is excited about it. And then if you're not the right fit, you're leaving them to nothing. So then they discover their own roots on their own, and it may be someone who doesn't have their interest in mind, right? But also just like this lack of continuity or infrastructure around, like, no, M&A can be a force for good. M&A can have ethical, impactful results. M&A can be an impact
Yeah.
enhancing moment rather than this door that shuts, right? I mean, there's so many more possibilities. So I think it's really interesting that you're kind of thinking about that too. So you talked about education with sellers, right? Like trying to get in front of legacy business owners. What does that look like from the ecosystem? What is the work that Whisper Group does? I mean, I know you said that you have like some attorneys, some wealth advisors that if your client
Mhm.
doesn't have one, you can redirect them. But what are you doing from like an ecosystem building perspective to reach out to find more brokers, more representatives, more service providers that are maybe thinking about this in kind of closeted ways and expanding their horizons about what M&A can be, so that we have more transaction activity, especially in the time when we need it. Because to your other point, 8 out of 10 businesses today
Right.
don't sell, they close. And it's not because they're not financially viable. They just don't think anybody's going to come for them, or the environment, the prestige around
Right.
M&A
It's very
is
dark.
dark,
Yeah.
right? It is dark. Like, these are bad outcomes. So what are you guys doing, or how do you think about building that ecosystem of good actors or people who are thinking about it
Yeah,
in a
it's
little more creative
really the
ways?
thought, leadership, education, and visibility. So it's kind of a three-pronged. So what we try to do is, of course, get the word out there. So we have different forums, which we're able to do that within. It's our acquired, not retired community of our exited female founders,
Mm,
whether or not it's through conferences and panels,
mm,
which we've been doing a lot of on our team. We divide and conquer and really try to, when we're invited to get to speak on opportunities or participate in different engagement conversations, again, that alone is such a ripple effect when you get into different organizations of just
mm,
explaining to people the possibilities and explaining the stories. Another huge outlet is the Exit Whisperer podcast. So Carrie, having gone through her own 8-figure exit back in 2021, talks about what the process was like, what she would have done differently, even though she had a happy and healthy exit, and the learning curves along the way and what propelled her to
mm,
start the Whisper Group.
mm,
All of these drive change by
mm-hmm,
action, by hearing stories. She interviews exited
mm,
founders, so they talk firsthand. This is over 200 women of what either went right or what went wrong.
mm,
This kind of dichotomy
mm.
brings and drives the change.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
and then most importantly, by
Yeah.
driving successful outcomes for our clients, also changes the narrative around M&A and A and how
Mm-hmm.
we operate.
Mm,
And if we can't do it, yeah.
totally. Yeah. And every new connection, every new lawyer that you're introduced to, or you might have opportunities for influence or wealth advisors, where you're like, hey, well, you should really be thinking about talking to your clients about this, or having more conversations, because of course that also
Hmm.
can lead to deal flow for you, right? That's interesting. Okay, very helpful. And I think the other obligation, and we kind of think about that the same here at Ethical Exits. Like, that's why we have this podcast. Is like is to break down for people who are not thought about it. or don't know how it works, like what it is, like what are these mechanisms, what are the terms, what are the structures, what are the opportunities, who's participating in this space. So having someone on that represents sellers, it's so important to us. We're so happy to have met you, and to have that conversation with you and to learn more about your business, because I think you offer something very valuable. I think a lot of folks think they can go it alone, and certainly they can, maybe if they have a good attorney and a good CPA and their books are clean. But I also think having good sell side advisory is like important. You should have a representative. You should have someone who's helping you think through this, because you don't know everything and you don't maybe know what red flags to look for, because this is probably the only time you're going to sell your business
Exactly.
for a lot of folks, right? So having someone to help them through it, and I think also giving them the dignity and the care and patience to help them understand the emotional labor that this is, to confront what that might look like. I was talking to a gentleman the other day, and he described, for a lot of these founders, that it's like selling your
Yeah,
family home,
exactly.
right? It's second to that. It's super emotional. You may think that the skills that you had to build your business are the right ones to help you sell your business, but oftentimes they can be actually polar opposites, right? So it's not something to rush. It's something to really consider. So I think your services are really well guided there. And then I think the other responsibility is, that we're really attuned to and we think about a lot, is how can we recruit different
Right.
buyers? How can we help other people, and you kind of touched on this too, how can we help other folks who have built really great businesses, are ethically minded, are thinking about this from a shared wealth creation opportunity, agency power, opportunities to solve real world problems through their business models. How can we get them to think
Yeah.
bigger, maybe, or to think differently about what scale can look like, and how M&A can also be used for them, not as some destructive force, right? But as an amplifying force. So bringing more differentiated buyers to the buy side, I think, is interesting, and that only helps what you're doing, right? Because if you're able to offer your sellers a wide variety of different types of buyers, not just the default financial
Yeah.
buyer, the private equity buyer, the roll up player that comes in with cash and a good multiple, but what is the whole nature of opportunity? Is there someone locally who would be interested in taking over your business through an ETA vehicle? Is there someone in your
Right.
company, management buyout, that you can look at? Is employee ownership maybe an opportunity? Can you advise them? And I think through your model, because you're not so focused on
Yep.
a commission, maybe that provides room where you can say, look, actually, employee ownership might be something that you're interested in, either through a phased, kind of
Yep.
situation, or all at once, or a mission driven buyer who might want, seller financing and an earnout, but at the end of the day, they're going to be working towards their
Yeah.
goals comprehensively, not just from that one time cash offer. So super valuable, Molly. You shared so much with us that I think is really, really valuable to our audience. I'd love to, of
Yes.
course, we'll continue to talk and work together. But it's an honor to have you on the podcast. And we always end with
Amazing.
the same question, same closing question, because we believe in that capitalism 2.0, that everything we
Yes.
do should touch and scale philanthropy. So we like to give our guests an opportunity to share a cause or an
Mhm.
organization that's meaningful to you, that you might
Yes.
want to
Well,
direct our
if I
listeners to.
can be so bold, I have a professional one and a personal one, if that's okay. So, professionally,
Great.
I think what the Tory
Yes.
Burch Foundation is doing is incredible. Their commitment to
Mm,
supporting women entrepreneurs through access to capital, education, mentorship, we've gotten to partner with them, and seeing the ripple effect and changes they are making for women who may not have
mm,
had the accessibility or the visibility to pursue their dreams of entrepreneurship,
mm,
making an impact, doing things that matter. It has been
mm,
just completely beautiful to witness, be a part of, getting to see that firsthand. So that would be my
mm,
professional organization that I would love to spread awareness to. And then personally, the American Heart Association and the National Autism Foundation, both of which have greatly helped
mm,
members within my family, and I'm very passionate about supporting.
mm. Oh, fantastic. None of those
Really?
have been mentioned
Okay.
before,
Okay.
so those are great
Wonderful.
ones.
Yeah, those are
Yeah.
incredible organizations that have single-handedly changed my life. So I'm sure by having other people who need resources and accessibility, they would be helpful for them as well.
Fantastic, Molly. Well, those are great. We'll certainly add those to the website and talk about them when we share this episode out with our audience. But thank you so much for the work you're doing. Thank you for providing such valuable services in a space where you're needed, desperately needed. This perspective is needed. I think your model is really creative. Certainly encourage our listeners to take a look at the Whisper Group,
Yes,
male
we
or
can
female.
help everyone. And you know what?
think
One
it's
thing we
okay.
both talked about, Hannah, before, and I love what you're doing at Steward. It's just so incredible having that amazing resource for people that, again, has the accessible entryway point. Even if we are not the right answer, we are not going to leave you high and dry, and we will connect you with the partner that can help get you to your goal, whatever that goal is. We can be there as a resource.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time, Molly. Really appreciate your support.
And thank you for bearing with my
Wi-Fi.